Right now, your body is running on a trick your ancestors didn't have for millions of years. You're digesting a cooked breakfast in about an hour. A chimpanzee eating raw fruit and leaves needs most of its day just to chew and digest enough calories to survive. That gap, that one difference, is older than agriculture, older than language, older than the human brain as we know it. And for most of the time our ancestors have existed on this planet, they didn't have the thing that closed that gap. They had no fire. Let's put a number on that. Modern humans have been around for roughly 300,000 years. Controlled, reliable fire use goes back, at the very outside, about 1 million years. But the human lineage itself, the genus Homo, stretches back nearly 2.8 million years. Do the math and you get a strange, uncomfortable fact for well over half of our evolutionary story. Something walking on two legs, using stone tools, raising children, and slowly turning into us was doing it all in the cold, in the dark, without a single campfire. So here's the question worth sitting with for the next 10 minutes. How do you become human before you have fire? Let's start with the puzzle that actually kicked off this whole debate. In 2007, Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham published a book called Catching Fire, arguing that cooking, not tool use, not hunting, was the real turning point in human evolution. His logic was simple. Our guts are small. Our brains are enormous and metabolically expensive. Raw food, especially raw meat, takes far more energy to digest than cooked food. Something had to bankroll the brain. Wrangham's answer: fire. It's a genuinely elegant idea. One Control Z on evolution, and suddenly you've got extra calories, smaller teeth, a shorter gut, and energy left over to grow the most expensive organ in the animal kingdom. Case closed, right? Here's the contradiction. When archaeologists actually went looking for fire old enough to match Wrangham's timeline, they mostly couldn't find it. Burnt bone and ash show up in the record surprisingly late and surprisingly rarely for a species that supposedly needed fire to become a species at all. The best early evidence we do have comes from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa. In 2012, archaeologist Francesco Berna, working with a team analyzing sediment deep inside the cave, identified burned bone fragments and ashed plant remains dated to roughly 1 million years ago, some of the earliest solid evidence anywhere for fire use by early humans. That's genuinely impressive. It's also 1.8 million years too late to explain the brain expansion that had already started in early Homo erectus. There's another candidate site, Gesher Benot Ya'aqov in Israel, where archaeologist Nama Goren Inbar and her team found clustered burnt flint and wood dated to around 780,000 years ago, evidence that looks like repeated habitual fire use, not a one-off lightning strike. Still nowhere close to 2.8 million. So if fire didn't build the early human brain, what did? This is where the story stops being about flames and starts being about something a lot less cinematic: chewing and each other. Before fire, early Homo wasn't eating things raw the way you'd eat a raw potato. They were pounding, slicing, and mashing food with stone tools, essentially pre-digesting it outside the body. Cut marks on 2.5 million-year-old bones show they were also getting at fatty, calorie-dense marrow other animals couldn't reach. You didn't need a fire pit. You needed a sharp rock and the nerve to fight a hyena for the leftovers. And here's a thought: imagine your entire dinner prep routine was hit food with a rock until it's edible. No seasoning. No Uber Eats backup plan. Just violence and patience. Kind of puts your Tuesday night in perspective. That's the physical side. But there's a second, quieter survival strategy that mattered just as much: staying warm and safe without heat. Early hominins in colder climates weren't relying on flame for warmth, they were relying on fur, on shelter, on huddling in groups, and eventually, on clothing made from processed hides. Genetic studies of human body lice, which only live in clothing, not fur, suggest humans were wearing some form of clothing at least 170,000 years ago, likely much earlier. That's a survival technology with zero smoke, zero light, and zero risk of accidentally torching your own campsite. No fire also meant no protection from predators after dark. So what filled that gap? Almost certainly other people. Larger, more cooperative social groups meant more eyes watching the tree line at night. More shared vigilance, more safety in numbers instead of safety in flame, which brings us to the twist this whole video has been building toward. Everyone assumes fire is what made us human, that mastering flame was the spark, literally, for bigger brains and modern behavior. But the evidence says something closer to the opposite. Cooperation, tool use, and social bonding came first and made the human brain possible long before fire ever entered the picture. Fire didn't create the conditions for humanity. Humanity created the conditions where fire eventually became useful. Let that sink in for a second. We tell this story backwards all the time. Cavemen discover fire, suddenly become smart. In reality, something was already getting smart, cooperative, and organized enough that when fire finally showed up in the toolkit, hundreds of thousands of years later, we were ready to actually exploit it properly instead of just staring at it in confusion. Fire was a reward for already having the social software installed, not the reason we installed it. There's still a genuine open question in the field, and it's worth being honest about it. Exactly when fire went from occasional opportunistic use to every group, every night, everywhere is still debated. Some researchers think habitual fire use didn't become truly universal until sometime after 400,000 years ago. Others argue for pockets of earlier control that just haven't left enough archaeological trace to prove it yet. Nobody's faking certainty here. The ash record is thin, and thin records mean real disagreement. What we can say is this: for something like 2 million years, hominins survived brutal nights, freezing climates, and dangerous predators using nothing but stone, fat, fur, and each other. That's not a footnote to the fire story. That's the actual origin story, and fire just walked in late and took the credit. So let's close the loop. Roughly 2.8 million years ago, early Homo starts using stone tools to process food without any flame at all. Around 1 million years ago, at sites like Wonderwerk Cave, we get our first solid proof of fire use. By 780,000 years ago, at Gesher Benot Ya'aqov, that use looks habitual, not accidental. And today, you finish an entire cooked meal in the time it would have taken your ancient relatives to just start chewing. Everyone assumes fire made us human. It didn't. We were already most of the way there, cooperating, tool using, socially bonded, and fire simply arrived to speed up a transformation that had been happening in the cold and the dark for 2 million years already. So next time you're standing over a stove, or just microwaving something at 11 p.m. because you couldn't be bothered to cook properly, know that the ability to do that at all is a genuinely late addition to the human story. The real engine was never the flame. It was everything that had to happen first, so that when the flame finally showed up, we already knew exactly what to do with it. If you want to dig into the sources behind this one, Wrangham's cooking hypothesis, the Wonderwerk Cave findings, the lice and clothing research, I've linked a few of the key papers and books in the description.